We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Tuesday, and Monday was a motherfucker of a day. We got plenty to talk about. It went late into the night, but I stuck around, tried to listen to everything that happened, and it was interesting. And it was devastating to Donald Trump and a whole bunch of other motherfuckers. Now, I'm still dealing with the same situations I had yesterday. I've got a weak camera. The audio isn't as good as it normally is. But the good news is I'm not sitting in the pool house. I'm sitting in my condo in the one spot that has enough light to make this work. And the air conditioning's on. So I got that working for me. So that's good. Let's talk about what happened last night. At first, we heard that the Fulton County, Georgia grand jury issued 10 indictments. Now, everybody got real excited about that stuff. And what's important for you to understand is all those 10 indictments didn't necessarily have to pertain to Donald Trump and or the attempt to overturn the election in Georgia in 2020. Some of them could have been just day-to-day mundane type of indictments that courts always put out. There was really only one indictment that was unsealed that we know about right now, at least at the time of this recording, and that was a motherfucking doozy. Oh, that was a doozy. Because in this one indictment, there are 19, count them, 19 defendants. A lot of them you know, some of them you don't. And there's one that's suspiciously missing. We're going to talk about that. So this one indictment comes out, and you're probably saying to yourself, how is it that they have 19 defendants under this one indictment? Well, I have two words for you. RICO Act. Yep, that's right, racketeering. We heard about that possibility that Fani Willis would file RICO charges, and she did. And when you file RICO charges, that means you can charge as many people as you want. That's the whole point of a RICO Act. So I want to give you some of the names on this list of defendants. I'm not going to give you them all because I don't have the second page, and some of them you've never heard of before. We'll probably hear more as time goes on. But let's look at the list. Let's look at the high points, if you will. Number one on the list, not surprising, Donald John Trump. Yeah, he's the leader of this whole racketeering gang, and he is the first one that's on the list for the indictments. Now, number two probably won't surprise you either. It's Rudy Giuliani. Now, some months back, we had heard that he had received a target letter, so this isn't surprising at all. Next on the list, guy by the name of John Eastman. You remember that motherfucker. He was speaking at the January 6th insurrection. He was there. They call him the architect of the coup attempt. So, yep, he's on the list. Next up, now this one is very interesting. We haven't heard much about him as of late, but we're going to start hearing more. And of course, I'm talking about Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Yeah, Mark Meadows. Fucking A. Now, Mark Meadows, we presume that he flipped in the federal cases to stay out from underneath the problems in the federal cases. Now, he's likely to get indicted still, but he's going to get easier charges and easier sentences for flipping on Donald Trump. But apparently in Georgia, he isn't one of the flippers because he is indicted. And frankly, he is culpable. He made a couple of trips down to Georgia to try to coerce people into overturning the election. He was also the middleman between Donald Trump and all the other people. Nobody talked to Donald Trump directly. They had to go through Mark Meadows. So he knows where all the bodies are buried, and he's in some fucking deep trouble right now. And we kind of expected that to be the case. Next up is a guy by the name of Kenneth Chesebro. He's a Wisconsin operative. He was involved in the architecture of the coup attempt as well. Next up is Jeffrey Clark. You remember that motherfucker. He's the lowly deputy attorney general that worked under Attorney General Rosen. He was a nobody, but he came up with a brilliant idea of sending letters to all the secretaries of states in the swing states and say, you know what, we got all kinds of election fraud. You should stop counting now. We're going to need a do-over on this shit. Now, Donnie liked so much what he was doing that he was thinking about firing Rosen and making him interim attorney general. Well, up until the time, everybody in the DOJ said, if you do that, motherfucker, we're all quitting. And of course, Donnie Trump backed off. Now, this guy, Jeff Clark, he's a self-important piece of shit who was a nobody, still a nobody, up until the time he gets charged and convicted of the crimes he's committed. But he's on the list, so that's good news. The next one is a name you'll recognize too, Jenna Ellis. You remember that young woman that was the mouthpiece for Donald Trump? She was on TV all the time, lying her ass off. Well, she's on the list. She's got an indictment, and she is charged with felonies, fucking felonies. Some other names: Ray Stallings Smith III, I don't know him. Robert David Cheeley, not familiar with him either, but we'll find out more about him. Michael Roman is a name we thought might have been one of the 6 co-conspirators in Jack Smith's indictment. Turns out he probably isn't. Well, maybe he is, but he's definitely indicted on this situation in Georgia. Then there's David James Schaefer. Now, the one other name that you'll recognize is Sidney Powell. You know, that crazy bitch that Donald Trump even thinks is fucking crazy. But as long as she was working in his benefit, he didn't care if she was crazy. Well, she's on the list too. She is going to be charged with felonies. Now, there's one name that didn't show up on this list, and it's a little surprising, maybe even a little disappointing. That name is Lindsey Graham. Now, how was it that Lindsey Graham didn't show up on this list? This seems absolutely crazy. We know he made 2 calls to Brad Raffensperger. We know he was way out of line. I mean, here's a senator from South Carolina trying to coerce and ask questions of a Secretary of State from Georgia. What business did he have doing that? Well, the fact is he had no business doing that. So how did Lindsey Graham slip out from under this? It's an interesting question. And there can only be one answer to that situation, and that is Lindsey must have flipped on Donald Trump and all the rest. It's not surprising. Lindsey Graham is a coward, a pussy-ass bitch, as we come to know these Republicans, and he probably saw the writing on the wall. He knew he committed some crimes, and he probably thought, well, I'm going to save my ass and flip on all these motherfuckers, including my Lord and Savior, Donald Trump, which he did. I'm presuming he did. That's the only way he could get out of this without being indicted. Now, what's going to be interesting is if he did flip, he's ultimately going to have to testify. Now, what's that going to do to the Trump-a-fucks? What's that going to do to Donnie Trump and all these other clowns? He just put off his pain and suffering, and instead of the prospect of going to jail, he decided to flip. And that's what cowards do, and that's what Lindsey Graham has done. So that's not all the names on the list. Again, a lot of them you don't know, but we'll find out more about it as time goes on, probably later today. But the fact of the matter is, this is a doozy of an indictment, and these are RICO charges, and that causes real problems for everybody involved in this particular indictment. Now, some of the charges include violation of the Georgia RICO Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, as I mentioned, solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer, false statements and writings, solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. There's a total of 161 violations in this indictment. This is going to be a doozy. this is what we were looking for. This is what we hoped for. And that's what's going on. Now, I don't know if there's anything more coming out of Georgia, but this is enough. There's a couple of things you need to know about a case like this with 19 defendants. First of all, Fani Willis, when she spoke afterwards, she said, so she was asked if she's going to try these people individually or all together. She said very specifically, she's going to try them all together. Now think about that for Donald Trump. Donald Trump likes to be the star, likes to be the center of attention, but there is going to be presumably 19 or 18 other defendants in this case. He'll just be one of the herd. Now, one legal scholar said he'd be surprised if all 19 were tried. And that is because what they expect to happen is that some of these people will plead guilty and then flip on Donald Trump or Giuliani or Eastman or something. They'll flip on the top guys. And that's probably what will happen. That's probably why they were included on this list. They aren't as worried about charging them because their crimes are a little less serious than some of these others. They just want to put the pressure on them so that when it comes down to it, that they'll flip on the big guys and make the prosecution easier. So when it's all said and done, there probably won't be 19 defendants. I don't know how many will flip or how many they need to flip for that matter, but expect that to happen. Now, Fani Willis said one other pretty ominous thing. Somebody asked her, somebody from the press said, well, what's the minimum the minimum sentence in these cases, and what's the situation for probation? Now, she didn't answer the minimum sentence. I've heard some people say 5 years. I've heard some people say 10 years. I suppose it has more bearing on what the particular charge is against that individual. But she did say something that I thought was pretty ominous. She said, as far as probation, that doesn't come into play here. If you are convicted of any of these crimes in a racketeering case, it is mandatory jail time. Oh, shit. That means Donnie Trump. That means Rudy Giuliani. That means Mark Meadows. They get convicted, mandatory jail time in Georgia. This is going to be fucking interesting. Because I got to tell you, what's going on in Georgia is vastly different than what we see with the federal charges. First of all, she said she's putting out arrest warrants for all these people, but she's going to be nice and tell them that they can turn themselves in by Friday the 25th. That's a week from this Friday. We'll see if everybody does it. I'm suspecting Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and some of the other bigger guys will. They don't want to be tracked down, cuffed, and perp walked into the courthouse. They're going to want to make it look as good as possible. So I suspect everybody will surrender on or by the 25th. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. This is all going to be very interesting too, because Georgia is a little tougher situation than the federal charges. As we've talked about before, with the federal charges, they've said that Donald Trump will be mugshot, that he will be fingerprint, he will probably be handcuffed, and he will have even more stringent restrictions as far as the shit he talks about. You know, tampering with witnesses, threatening prosecutors, talking shit about the state. He's already doing that. He's going to have to address that when it comes to the arraignment, because you have to understand the arraignment is about bail as much as anything. And you have to earn bail. You have to be worthy of bail. If you are a danger to society or other people, then that bail can be revoked and you spend your time in jail until the trial. Now, with the federal charges, Donald Trump's been given a lot of leeway. I think that Judge Chutkan in the Washington, D.C. case is going to be a little tougher on him. And he's already still talking shit. But the Georgia thing is going to be much different. They don't give two fucks. They have state laws and they're going to stick to them. Donald Trump's already talking about Fani Willis. No doubt he'll be talking about some of these other people. And the last thing he is legally supposed to do is to talk about other witnesses. Well, we know he's already done such things. And we'll still see what Judge Chutkan does. But it's conceivable, I don't know how realistic it is, but it's conceivable that when he gets arraigned and he's looking for bail, and no doubt he won't get the bail waived in this situation, they're going to make him pay. Donnie's got a little bit of a cash flow problem. But if they are worried about him being any kind of threat to witness tampering, to whatever, they're just going to throw him in the fucking clink. They don't care. You could see a little smile on Fani Willis's face because she knew she was making history and she knew she had all these motherfuckers dead to rights. And the lesser ones, she knows some of them will flip like tomorrow because they're scared shitless at this point. You know, it's one thing to be a former president or a chief of staff and have a few bucks in the bank. You can afford to fight it. But if you're some of these lesser known people, you don't have the money, you don't have the notoriety, and you're scared shitless because you're going to go to jail and just be fucking forgotten. They don't want that. They have families, they have kids, they have jobs, they have futures that they hope for. They aren't just going to stand around and be Donald Trump's buddy or Rudy Giuliani's buddy. They are going to flip. And you know that Fani Willis knows this. As I said, when she gave her talk after the indictment was unsealed, she had kind of a little smile on her face, and that has to drive Donald Trump motherfucking nuts. It's one thing if you contradict Donald Trump, he hates that. Another thing, if you go after him, you know what he said about that. If you go after me, I'll come after you. Well, good luck with that, Donnie, in Georgia. That ain't going to fly. But the fact that she happens to be a woman of color, I think this is particularly maddening to Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if Donald Trump understands how stringent things are with his lip flapping in Georgia, but he's going to learn very quickly. He's going to get hit with a order of protection. There's no question. That wasn't an unreasonable or unusual thing when that occurred in the Jack Smith thing. It's just that Donald Trump bitched about it. And Donald Trump has already violated that order of protection. It's going to be interesting to see what Judge Chutkan does about that. Donald Trump is probably in the worst position he's ever been in his life. Like I said, if he's convicted in this Rico indictment and all these charges, he could be sitting in jail for a long time. Now, each one of these charges may be 5 or 6 or 10 years in jail, but they're multiple charges. You don't just get one for, you don't get all for one in these kind of deals. You're going to get multiple charges and multiple sentences. It's just a matter of they're going to run them concurrently or consecutively. Concurrently would mean like if you had 5 5-year charges, they'd all run at the same time and he'd get out in 5 years. Consecutively would be a little different. If he had 5 5-year charges and they ran consecutively, that means he would be there for fucking 25 years. But I think the important thing to understand is that with Donald Trump, as I've always said, it's just one charge that is necessary. One charge and one jail sentence is all that's needed to take Donald Trump out of the equation, out of the narrative. He's going to be 78 years old in 2024, and he's not in great health, physically or mentally or emotionally. This is going to take him down. These trials, he's got 4 indictments now, 4 indictments, and how many civil lawsuits? I don't even fucking know, 3, 4, 5 of those. This guy isn't going to have time to change his fucking diaper. or have somebody else do it. It's just not going to have the fucking time to do it. So Donald Trump is going to be put through hell. I think Donald Trump said it best one time when he was referring to somebody else. He said, well, I'll say, Donald Trump, he's going to be going through some things. He's going to go through some things, I'll take another phrase of his, like nobody's ever seen. And that's pretty much true. I mean, when you look at Donald Trump with 4 indictments and close to 100 charges, I mean, we're talking about not only the worst situation for a former president, but I don't think you see normal people with this kind of pressure, this number of indictments, and this huge number of charges. I mean, what the fuck do you do with that? If you only need one to put you away for the rest of your life, your odds aren't looking good. Donald Trump's odds are horrible at this point. And Donald Trump is going to be freaking out to say the least. There's one other name, and I don't remember the name of the woman. I think her name was Misty something. She's on the list, and she's relatively unknown. She's a local person in Fulton County, Georgia, but you'll know her. Remember the story that came out just recently that said that there was a connection between Donald Trump's lawyer, Sidney Powell, and Rudy Giuliani, and Donald Trump himself, with the attempt to somehow grab voting machines or alter voting machines in Coffee County, Georgia. Remember that? That in itself, that charge right there is pretty damning. Well, this woman, Misty, whatever the fuck her name is, she's indicted too. And what her job was she was an election official in Coffee County when all this shit went down. And where she went astray was that not only did she allow them to tamper with the voting machines, she wrote them a fucking written invitation. Sure, come on out, check it out, grab them, do whatever you want to fucking do to them. So she fucked around and found out. She's a nobody sitting in Coffee County, Georgia, and now she's been indicted with Rico charges in addition to Donald Trump and all the rest. I'm guessing she's not having a good night tonight. I'm guessing nobody on this list is having a good night. It'll be interesting with the Mark Meadows thing. I find that the most intriguing because we have heard so little out of him. Are we going to hear more now? Maybe not. The whole Lindsey Graham thing is going to be interesting because Lindsey's going to get the questions. How come you're not on the list? You made the calls. I'm sure he's going to say, well, I did nothing wrong. That's why. No, motherfucker. You are going to flip on Donald Trump and all these fuckers because you're a pussy ass bitch. So it was a heck of a night. It was a weird night too, because I got a lot of DMs and emails and text messages and stuff asking me about it. I was out bouncing around. I'm in Georgia right now, as you know, Savannah, Georgia. Wife and I had a great day, went down to Tybee Island, hit the beach for a little bit, roamed around, had dinner. It was a good time. And I wasn't watching the news as much as I would normally do. I wasn't quite as attentive as I'd normally be. But then I started hearing about how Fani Willis had the grand jury in. They had 2 people testify. There was the former lieutenant governor of Georgia and an independent journalist. Now, what was weird about this was these people were supposed to testify today, Tuesday. But Fani Willis got them in there early. And then after they testified, they closed out the order of business for the grand jury, but she said, stick around. Well, that's a bad sign for people waiting to be indicted. And they stuck around. And then all of a sudden, somehow a docket got posted on the Fulton County website, but it was taken down almost as quickly as it went up. Now, Reuters, I think, grabbed that document, downloaded it, and some other people had a copy of it. In fact, one of my friends on TikTok, friends, I mean, I watch his stuff, Hawk, he had the document, he read it, and what it said was that there were 13 charges against Donald Trump. But then it went away and they said, no, that was a mistake. That was inaccurate. I don't know what happened there, but apparently somebody in Fulton County got a little antsy and put it up before they were supposed to. And of course, now the Republicans are making a thing about it. Oh, you can't indict him now because that was wrong. You screwed up. Yeah, fuck you. That ain't going to happen. Somebody asked Fani Willis about it, and she goes, that's not my department. I just indict motherfuckers, and that's what I just motherfucking did. So after that, I thought, well, it was just a mistake. Maybe somebody hacked the shit. And I thought, okay, we're not going to hear anything till tomorrow. But as I'm watching the news, I hear, 10 indictments coming out of Fulton County. Then I knew shit was about to pop. Initially, I thought all 10 indictments would have to do with Donald Trump. They would indict individuals, and that's why there would be 10. We were hearing that there might be anywhere from 12 to 15 indictments. Well, that was wrong, at least to this point, unless there's superseding indictments from Fani Willis. She didn't mention anything about that, but it was just one indictment, and it had 19 people on it. So that foreman, remember that young lady that was foreman of the Georgia grand jury, the special grand jury? And she came out and told us some different stuff. We'd know some names and others you wouldn't know. And there could be 12 to 15. Well, it seems like she was completely right, except that there were more indicted than she was suggesting. But some we do know and some we don't know. But she was telling the truth. She's a little goofy, but she was telling the truth. And it was interesting. We weren't sure whether to believe it or not when it finally came out, but turns out she was right. So we're going to be basically watching what's going on. I've done some TikToks about it, and I told people that they should come to the podcast because we can talk about it a little more in depth. I suspect that I'll probably have a guest on tomorrow. I've had a few people talk to me about coming on because they're anxious and they're excited. That's the one thing that I found really interesting and fun, is that I got all these DMs saying, I'm staying up, I'm waiting, I'm going to crack some champagne or grill up a ribeye. People are truly excited. And this is one thing I wanted to mention. Up until this point, there was always some talk about whether or not indicting a former president might be divisive or a problem for this country. And under normal circumstances, I guess that's a possibility. But under this circumstances, I personally thought that if there weren't indictments, that would cause more outrage and divisiveness in this country. We've gone through a lot here. We've seen a lot happen. We've seen a lot of crimes. We've seen people trying to destroy our government, our country, and our political system, not to mention our electoral system. And without some accountability, people just aren't going to trust this country anymore. There has to be accountability. The things that were committed against this country were absolutely fucking egregious, and accountability had to be meted out. And the important thing to understand about indictments, we have 4 indictments, maybe close to 100 charges, felony charges against Donald Trump. None of that says that Donald Trump is guilty. He's like anybody under the law in this country. He is innocent until proven guilty. But we know how Donald Trump is. He likes to implicate himself. He likes to reveal evidence against him, and he's done that multiple times. There was no question he's going to be convicted. And the thing that intrigues me the most, we've got Jack Smith, we've got Fani Willis. I'm really intrigued by Fani Willis because she doesn't look like she's fucking around. And the whole thing about if you are convicted of these RICO charges, there is a mandatory jail sentence. So you think the state of Georgia, you think Fani Willis is going to say, well, you were convicted, but you're formerly the president, so we'll cut you some slack. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think that's going to happen. All right, we will take a quick break and we will be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. As I've said, I'm down in Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, quite a ways from Fulton County, maybe 4 hours. But it's kind of nice to be in Georgia when an historic event like this happens. And make no mistake, this is an historic event. It's never happened before, of course, and I dare say there's nobody that's been indicted and charged to this degree that I can possibly think of. Usually it's more specific and more limited, but Donald Trump is getting hit from all fucking sides. And of course, he's talking shit, which is probably going to get him into more trouble. Now, he was even talking shit before the indictment came out and was released. He believed he was going to get indicted, so he was trying to take some of the edge off, or he was trying to, I don't know what the fuck he was trying to do, but if he continues to try to do it, he's going to have a problem with Fani Willis and Georgia. But in a statement released to the press, the former president's campaign attacked the district attorney, other district attorneys, and the special counsel before promoting his successful campaign and citing his poll numbers. It's all about ratings with Donald Trump. Well, he's going to have to worry about some ratings because we know there's some question whether the trials could be put on television on the federal level. But in Georgia, they can do it. And I guess given the circumstances, they would probably do that. And the important thing is that they get some good ratings, Donnie. Donnie would fucking love that. Now, he went on to say these activities by Democratic leaders constitute a grave threat to American democracy and are direct attempts to deprive the American people of their rightful choice to cast their vote for president. No, that would be you, Donnie. You lost by 7 million votes to Joe Biden. You're the one to try to take away votes from people and try to subvert the 2020 election. Now, the statement says, call it election interference or election manipulation. It's a dangerous effort by the ruling class to suppress the choice of the people. It is an un-American and wrong. No, actually committing RICO felonies is far far more wrong than people just trying to prosecute you and hold you accountable for the bullshit you did. Donald Trump went on to say they're taking away President Trump's First Amendment right for free speech and the right to challenge a rigged and stolen election that the Democrats do all the time. The ones who should be prosecuted are the ones who created the corruption. Well, I think that's what they're doing, Donnie. I think they are arresting the people that were the most corrupt, and that would be you, motherfucker. It's truly amazing how he loves to project. It's almost like the Republicans do all the time. They just project, and every time they claim something, you can almost guarantee that they are as guilty for this as anybody. And now that this is out there and this has happened, it's going to be interesting to see how Donald Trump reacts and how the Republicans react to this. I mean, this is some pretty damning stuff. A lot of people are indicted. Now, what's interesting, there are people that have already been charged and convicted of the J6 issue. These are the working men and women that went rogue and attacked the U.S. Capitol. And sounds like they're having fun with the prospect of Donald Trump getting indicted and ultimately convicted. Donald Trump's legal troubles are being viewed as a source of hope for some January 6 defendants. Hope. Can't imagine where the hope would be. The report notes that before Trump was indicted in the January 6 election conspiracy, more than 1,000 people had already been charged in connection with the attack on the Capitol, and that Trump's inclusion in that group has left the January 6 defendants in the DC jail trading legal theories how Trump's case could affect their own, and joking about which empty cell house the 45th president of the United States would spend time at. Man, these motherfuckers are oblivious, aren't they? They think, well, Donald Trump gets arrested and goes to jail. That should help us. Well, how's that going to help us? Is it only going to help you when JFK Jr. becomes president and then pardons you all? You keep thinking that. You keep thinking that. I love it when people are blindsided, and you're going to be blindsided. You would think after all that you've been through, those folks in jail, that you would have lost some hope, because Donald Jesus Trump has not been there for you. Nobody got pardoned. Nobody was there to help you. You're sitting in jail because you're a fucking criminal. One of these defendants said this, Shane Jenkins, I think his name is, we're like, if Trump comes in here, we're going to put him in 45 cell, said Shane Jenkins, 46 of Houston, who was found guilty of several charges in connection with the riot, including one Trump now faces, and is currently being held in a DC jail. We definitely talk about Donald Trump. I don't think they'll ever put him in jail per se. And if they do, I hope they would bring him here. He would have a good time, and it would be awesome to get to meet Donald Trump. Oh yeah, if Donald Trump shows up in jail, you're the motherfuckers he wants to hang out with. Don't be so sure about that. Now, Tamara Perryman, the wife of a January 6th defendant, Brian Jackson, put it this way: welcome to the club, Trump. You're a J6er now. Such hopes aren't completely without merit. Defense lawyer and former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi told the Post, noting that the obstruction charges against Trump, in the estimation, are hanging by a thread, given the Supreme Court configuration. Of course, the Supreme Court is going to fucking save you. Not so, but what happens if the Supreme Court does save you, but he still has to go to prison in fucking Georgia? He won't be with you motherfuckers. He'll be in Georgia in jail. I love how these people can keep coming up with hopes and dreams. Oh, this bad thing happened, but that just shows that it's all going to turn out right and Donald Trump will be president again. Sorry to tell you, motherfuckers, you're lost. You don't know what you're talking about. Now, one of the J6ers says, having Trump as part of the equation, that does help the other J6 defendants charged with obstruction. But Rossi noted that Trump, along with 300 others, still face serious charges, of which many have already been convicted. Yeah, you're not getting off, motherfucker. But keep believing, man. I don't want to be the guy that takes away your hopes and dreams. Wow. They're sitting in jail and they still have hopes that Donald Trump is going to save them. Fucking unbelievable. Now, here's a story that came out prior to the latest indictments, but I would have a feeling that Donald Trump's strategy is the same. Basically saying Trump won't stop his social media rants until the judge addresses it, says aides. Aides of Donald Trump say that he has no intention of stopping his attacks on social media because he believes he's a victim of injustice. Well, of course he does. And he's like any other incorrigible child. Until you get some accountability, until you get some punishment, you keep doing it. But usually when people do that, they're just amazed that anybody actually held them accountable. And I think if you're talking about Fani Willis in Georgia, you're talking about Jack Smith and Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C., those aren't the people to be fucking with. Those are the people that are going to take this seriously and not cut you any slack because you're a former fucking president. Now, CNN cited his allies and staffers Monday afternoon as they revealed that nothing could be done to stop the former president from ranting on his personal site. He'll share what he feels is necessary, and if she has a problem with it, she will address it, a Trump advisor told CNN, referring to Judge Tanya S. Chutkan. Can you imagine that? The advisors are basically saying, nothing we can do. Leave it to Judge Chutkan. Well, I think that's a mistake. I think if you leave it to Judge Chutkan, Donald Trump is going to be sitting in a fucking cell, maybe with his J6 buddies. And here's the thing, all you J6 dumb fuck redneck pieces of shit, if he's sitting in jail with you, he ain't gonna like you fuckers. He's gonna be looking down his nose at you redneck pieces of shit. He thinks you're idiots. He just used you. And when you end up in jail with him, should that happen, you will realize that very fucking quickly. Other sources close to the former president explained that he says he's being targeted unfairly by the judicial system, and he talks about it on social media to tell people about his injustice. So the people around him, the people that should be able to control him, cannot, and they readily admit to it. That is another problem, though, for those people, those lawyers that represent Donald Trump. If he continues doing what Judge Chutkan told him not to do, not only is Donald Trump potentially accountable, but so are his lawyers. They could get sanctions, they could get disbarred, they could get a lot of shit. That's why, for the life of me, I don't understand why these lawyers continue to do this stupid bullshit. They know it's stupid bullshit, but they continue to do it. Is it because of money? Well, I got to tell you, if I was to lose my reputation and job prospects and be broke for the rest of my life because I couldn't get a job, there is no amount of money that I would accept to compromise my values. But there are some lawyers that will, and they have, and they will continue to do so. The report explained that it's unknown what Trump lawyers are advising him, but it appears any advice for restraint is falling on deaf ears. Well, big surprise. Donald Trump hires lawyers and then very specifically doesn't listen to them. Why he gets lawyers, I don't know. I mean, lawyers are there to advise you about the law, of which they know more than their client does. But Donald Trump cannot admit that anybody knows more about anything than him. And this is what gets him in trouble. This is what's getting his lawyers in trouble. Now, in court last week, Chutkan said if anyone makes inflammatory statements about the case, she would move the trial date closer so as to protect any witness or possible contamination of the jury pool. Now, right after she said that, you could see that kind of shook the defense. I don't know if it shook Donald Trump or not, or whether he believes it, but that's an interesting ploy. Keep talking, bitch, and I'll just make the court case start early. And that's probably a wise thing to do. The thing about it is Donald Trump and his lawyers want nothing more than to delay this motherfucker as long as they can get. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. In fact, somebody asked Fani Willis about time frame on this particular case in Georgia. And she said, well, I can't give you specific dates, but all our court cases would normally start within 6 months. So we're in August, September, October, November, December, January, February. That'd be February. Plenty of time to get it done before the 2024 election. And if Jack Smith gets his way, he wants to start his case in January. Oh, this could be a lollapalooza of fucking court cases for Donald Trump. Now, when you think about all these court cases, now tell me how you think he's going to run for the presidency. When is he going to have time? How is he going to get money? Nobody's sending him money anymore, and he's going to have to spend it all on legal fees, because we know that he spent $40 million in the first 6 months, and that pretty much tapped him out of his pack. The only thing you have to understand is now with new charges, a new Rico situation, and as we go further down the road and closer to trials, his legal expenses are going to get worse. Well, Donald Trump, after Chutkan made the inflammatory statements comment, Donald Trump said, "She obviously wants me behind bars. Very biased and unfair," Trump said Monday. Oh, that's going to help, Donnie. You're doing exactly what she told you not to do, and then you come out with this weak-ass shit. That's very biased and unfair. Oh, let's get a whole group of people and fight against Judge Chutkan. Nobody's fighting for you, Donnie. Not even the people that love you. Not even the people that think you're Jesus. They aren't fighting for you because it's a fucking lost cause. Now, Trump advisors told CNN that the legal team understands that they have to be careful in this situation, but they don't think Trump will stop posting completely in any of the cases, given he is running for president, as if that gives him some special treatment. One Trump aide said, "Anyone who thinks they're going to control what he posts on Truth, what he says in the media interviews, they're sort of kidding themselves." And this is coming from one of Trump's aides. I mean, this is something we all know, but you would think when things get serious like they are, that Donald Trump might think twice. Nope, he's not thinking twice. He's going to be the same old Donald Trump up until the time they put him in fucking jail. Like I say, Chutkan may do it ultimately. Georgia may do it immediately because he's already talking shit. Now, legal analysts have spent most of the day saying that the ex-president is playing with fire when he attacks judges and prosecutors online, but he took it up a notch when he told Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan not to comply with a grand jury subpoena. It's something that could be a reason for revoking his bail in Washington, D.C., explained former prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. Tampering with a witness, the exact thing he was told not to do. A former senior prosecutor for Robert Mueller, Andrew Weissman, suggested that it could make Trump's arraignment difficult in Georgia because they have higher demands for defendant issues like this. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Believe it or not, Georgia is a lot tougher than the federal government when it comes to things like this. Weissman said, in Georgia, it has to be demonstrated that the defendant poses no risk of intimidating witnesses or otherwise obstructing the administration of justice. Georgia's laws are different from the federal laws, as well as New York's and Florida's, which is why things could be unusual this time around. It's not going to be the same thing. He's not going to have as much of the leeway as he has with the federal cases. Georgia could be his demise, but let's not forget about Jack Smith. Jack Smith is somebody to contend with. He is a force, just as Fani Willis is. Now, MSNBC legal analyst Joyce Vance said Judge Tanya Chutkan, who is overseeing Trump's indictment for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, is treating the former president's public outburst as if he is a small child. And that's absolutely true. He is a fucking small child. Trump was arraigned earlier in the month on the 4 counts, as we know. Trump pleaded not guilty, and he's continued to rail against Judge Chutkan, which is, in my estimation, quite a mistake, a misjudgment, if you will. We know that last week the judge issued a protective order against the former president, warning him not to make inflammatory statements. So what's he do? He makes inflammatory statements. On Monday, as I said earlier, Trump claimed that Chutkan obviously wants him behind bars. Well, I don't know about Judge Chutkan, but I do. A lot of people I know do. Now, she was appearing on The Readout with Joy Reid, and she explained that Chutkan does have a broad judicial discretion, meaning she's got a lot of power. She can do what the fuck she wants. Now, Jason Johnson, one of the hosts, asked, how could she actually move forward on this? Would she have the power to say, you know, Trump's legal team doesn't have as much time to do research? Could she say, I'm not going to let as many witnesses come? What would speeding it up look like if Trump continues to violate the protective order? And that's the interesting thing. Weissman answered this by saying, so her obligation is to guarantee Trump lawyers and the former president have adequate time to prepare for the trial. That is, his due process rights are observed. Vance responded, but that's not a set number of days like the 70 days called for in a Speedy Trial Act. There's a lot of judicial discretion there. Vance went on to explain that Chutkan may reject requests from Trump's attorneys seeking delays for various reasons in the lead up to the trial. And, you know, frankly, that's probably what she will do. They'll say, we need a delay for this reason. We need a delay for that reason. And Judge Chutkan will say, tough shit. You didn't behave in the first go round, so now you're in fucking trouble now. Vance predicted that Chutkan will haul Trump back into court over his behavior. She almost has to. She may admonish him, Vance said. It will be professional. It will not be personal. But judges believe in progressive discipline. If we're talking about her and the way one might interact with a small child, and she'll be very explicit with him before she goes to the next level of disciplining him in order to ensure that everyone involved can get a fair trial. It's like what I said before. She'll call him in and give him a stern warning, and she'll say something like, now I'm running out of options here. The only option I have left is to put you in jail. So now is a good time to shut your fucking mouth. Now, she won't say it in those words, but you know me. I'll say the F word every chance I fucking get. Now, we were talking about Lindsey Graham earlier, how he was not on the list of the Rico indictment, and how that's unusual. And really the only answer, given that he was in the thick of it too, is that he flipped on Donald Trump, that he is going to be a witness. Now, just yesterday, this is before the indictment, Senator Lindsey Graham scoffed at the notion of ex-presidents being indicted and said, it's very unfair to prosecute former President Donald Trump. No, in fact, it would be unfair if they didn't prosecute him. The whole thing about no one above the law, well, Donald Trump's not above the law, and 4 indictments prove that. Trump has been indicted in federal court twice. He was charged in Florida over his retention of government documents. Special counsel Jack Smith says Trump willfully kept classified documents after leaving office. Now, of course, we have what's going on in Georgia in his attempt to overturn an election. You know, when this all started, way back when, I kept telling you that there would be accountability. Donald Trump would get charged and ultimately convicted. Initially, I wasn't sure if he'd spend time in jail. Now, I'm pretty sure that there is no choice but to put him in jail. At the time I said that, I didn't know how egregious these crimes were. And at this point, there's really no option. And again, like I said, with regards to Georgia, that is a RICO charge. And as Fani Willis said, That means mandatory jail time if you're convicted. So if he's convicted in Georgia, regardless of what happens in Florida, in DC, or New York, that motherfucker's going to jail if he's convicted. And I would have a feeling that Fani Willis's percentages are like 98, 90% conviction. She wouldn't bring a charge unless she felt pretty confident that she was going to win. And the way Donald Trump spews evidence all over the place, I feel pretty confident that he's going to be convicted. And he might very well spend time only in Georgia, but if it's 5 or 10 years, it's all over. This is what I've told you before. He doesn't have to be convicted of all 100 charges or whatever it is. He only needs 1 or 2. And when he gets those 1 or 2, even if he goes away for only 5 years, that's going to be too long for Donald Trump. He'll be 78 in 2024. He'll make him 83 or 84 by the time he gets out. He will be worthless by the time he gets out. He will be broke. He will be a broken man. He will be mentally and physically unable to do anything. So this is very telling. Even if it's only Georgia, and we know it's not, we know Jack Smith isn't exactly fucking around either, nor is Judge Chutkan. People always told me Donald Trump will get away with it. He won't be held accountable. He always gets away with it. I'm telling you right now, with what we know, with the 4 indictments and the 100+ felony charges, there is no way out for Donald Trump. There is no way out. He will be convicted of multiple crimes, and he will have to do jail time, if for no other place than fucking Georgia. So Donnie Trump should get himself ready to be incarcerated, because it's almost certainly going to happen. And to all you people that told me, oh, nothing's ever going to happen, I'm not the kind of guy who say, I told you so, but I fucking told you so. All right, we're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast, but I have one very fun story, a story that makes me happy. Tucker Carlson, he wrote a book, a memoir, I guess. And like anyone promoting a book, the general plan is to create a buzz, get people talking, and hopefully get them buying while people might be talking about Tucker at this point. A new biography by Chadwick Moore about former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. The buzz apparently failed fucking miserably. I mean, here's a guy that went on TV and had millions and millions of people watching him every day. But the book didn't go so well. Maybe it's because most of his audience can't read, or at this point can't afford $30 for a fucking book. With so much hot talk about Carlson's abrupt ouster from Fox News, that of course in the wake of the Dominion settlement, one would think a book putting the cable news star in the spotlight and featuring hundreds of hours of interviews with Carlson would pump up sales. You would think people would be just waiting to buy this fucking thing, not to mention Moore's sensational promotional tour, jam-packed with rumors about Carlson's firing and attacks on his former home. Now, according to the numbers provided by Publishers Weekly, Tucker, in its first week of release, when interest is the hottest, how many books do you think he sold? Well, that motherfucker sold 3,227 hard copy, putting it at number 15 on the hardcover nonfiction list. I got to tell you, if they thought they were going to make money off of Tucker Carlson, you need more than 3,000 books fucking sold. But that's not the only list that Tucker made or didn't make. On Amazon, in its list of best-selling biography, Tucker placed number 57, just behind graphic novels Persepolis, the story of childhood, which came out in 2004, is number 52, and the Audible version of presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy's 2021 book, Woke Incorporated, Inside Corporate America's Social Justice Scam. There's another waste of fucking time, but he was at number 53. The Kindle version, the cheaper version, where you just put it on your Kindle, that didn't even break the top 100. So Tucker Carlson may think he can leave Fox News and go off and be famous and successful in his own right. And maybe he can on his little podcast or whatever the fuck he's doing, but not selling books. No, Tucker Carlson couldn't sell a book to save his fucking soul. 3,000 books the first week when everything is at its hottest and nobody cares. Is it that they don't care, they can't read, or they can't afford it, or whatever the fuck it is? But if Tucker Carlson thought he was going to sell books, he is horribly mistaken. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. It's been a hell of a night the night before. We will no doubt have plenty to talk about tomorrow. Presumably, we might have a guest on here as well, so that would help out. It's always tough doing the podcast here in Georgia because the setup isn't quite the same as I have at home. And it's a little better tonight than it was yesterday, and at least we got the motherfucker done. And I'm glad. I would have hated to miss on a night like last night. That was historic. And that is ominous for Donald Trump and the Republicans. So I'm going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. Excited as hell to find out what the Republicans and Donald Trump say today. But we'll be back tomorrow. I hope you have a great day. Stay in touch with us on the Rational Boomer podcast, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.